is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
The analytics last year were an eye-opener for me to really support some of those simple basketball things that every coach says. We really do need to reverse the ball to three sides. We really do need to get a paint touch. We really do need to quit over-dribbling.
Marty Vosters is in his second season as a women's basketball graduate assistant coach at the University of Akron. During the 2024 WNBA season, Marty served as the head video coordinator for the LA Sparks under head coach Curt Miller. Marty began his coaching career at the University of Minnesota, where he worked under Coach Lindsay Whalen as a student manager for the women's basketball team. Hey, Hoopheads, the basketball season is here, and so are big savings from our friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. From now until November 29th, you can get an exclusive $3,500 off the Dr. Dish CT Plus. In addition, take advantage of Dr. Dish's schools-only buy now, pay later payment plans for even more savings. Simply put half down and shipping, and then have 12 months of zero interest to pay the rest. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com/financing. You can also follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Those are some great deals, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hello, this is Mark Downey, the head men's basketball coach at Arkansas Tech University, and you're listening to the Hoopheads podcast.
Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the #1 play diagramming software for coaches for years. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. For a limited time, Fast Model is offering Hoopheads listeners 15% off Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Just use the code HHP15 at checkout to grab your discount, and you'll be on your way to more efficient game prep and improved communication with your team. Fast Model also has new coaching content every week on its blog, plus play and drill diagrams on its Playbank. Check out the links in the show notes for more. Fast Model Sports is the best in basketball. Grab your notebook before you listen to this episode with Marty Vosters, women's basketball graduate assistant coach at the University of Akron. Hello, and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Lindsay here without my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, but I am pleased to be joined by the women's basketball graduate assistant at the University of Akron, Marty Vosters. Marty, welcome to the Hoopheads pod.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely excited to have you on. Looking forward to diving into all the things that you've been able to do in your career. Let's start by going back in time to when you were a kid. Tell me about your first experiences with the game of basketball. What made you fall in love with it when you were younger?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think, like a lot of the people on these podcasts, it starts out a lot of times playing for your dad, or, your dad was able to get you in the gym. Maybe it was your mother. I think no different with me. I remember in first grade, I joked that I'd been a female practice player since first grade. And my dad was coaching my older sister who was in third grade. And I was like the only organized basketball I could get around at that point. So in first grade already, I was going to a bunch of, my older sister's practices, and, I was playing live against them. And, since then, I think it's always been normal for me to be around, women's basketball since that young age. And obviously when I was able to get to third grade, joined my own team and played with my friends. And, from a small town in Wisconsin, really, not the biggest town, but I think we were really competitive in the certain sports that the town bought into, and basketball was one of them. So, went on to have a, fairly good career with, really good teams. And I wasn't a great player myself, but like some really successful teams at the high school level, for a really good coach that I enjoyed, and was able to play for my dad through seventh grade, and then on to a Hall of Fame high school coach, John Myron. So it was awesome to play for him, learned a lot from him, a great mentor, and, playing with, your best buddies at, a small town in Wisconsin. So.
Absolutely. Tell me about the influence of your dad on you as a coach, and maybe just share one or two things that you picked up from him, whether just by consciously looking at what he did or just kind of through osmosis of playing for him for all those years, things that are still with you kind of in your coaching style and your approach as a coach today.
Yeah, I think the big thing is he always, he'll joke with you that, he's not super smart X's and O's. And I think, he's humble saying that, but it's I think it's true. Like the things that he was really good at and what I appreciated, it was like a youth coach. I thought he was just a great, players coach, and he I thought he found like an individual thing with each player that, hey, I'm going to motivate this player in this way. And it's like, obviously at that level, like you have kids going out for, 7th grade basketball who maybe just are going out to be on a team and be around their friends. So it's like, I thought my dad did a good job of like, hey, I know everyone's not here. They don't want to play college basketball. They might not even want to play high school basketball. They just want to be here with their friends, get a workout in, like whatever it is. So I thought he did a good job of like blending a bunch of different people who are out there for different reasons. And I thought he did a good job of that and like trying to, please the players and like coaching for the players and, not worrying about his own, like he wasn't trying to teach us 1,000 plays. Like it was, I'm just going to teach you the basics. I'm going to let you guys have fun with it. And I'm going to, be there to motivate, be there to support, be there to try to build a team culture and just get us to play together with some simple principles. So I think some of those things like coaching is so much more than X's and O's. And I think he showed me that from a young age of everything else that it can be and that it should be as a coach. So.
I know that's a really good point, and I think it's one that all you got to do is show up at an AAU tournament and realize that there's a lot of coaches out there that could probably use that advice in terms of, right, the humility and just the approach of the fact that, hey, it's about my players, it's about the kids, and it's not necessarily about me as the coach. I think that's a great lesson to be able to take away from your dad without question. What about, you mentioned getting an opportunity to play for a Hall of Fame high school coach. I'm going to kind of ask you the same question relative to him. What are some things that you've taken away from your experience playing with him that are still influencing you today?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Someone who's, I think, helped me a lot in the coaching journey and just like a great basketball mind to learn from in high school. And I think some of the things, like he was old school, like he played for Dick Bennett at Stevens Point. So he's, kind of from that Bennett coaching tree, and he brought that to the high school level in, small town Wisconsin. And he was just, like it was defensive drill after defensive drill. And yeah, we all got sick of it. Yeah, we got mad at him days. Like, dude, why we've been playing defense for an hour and a half. Like, I need to shoot. And it was like, I think just buying into that. And he did a good job of like always telling us, one of his quotes I remember was like, working hard isn't going to guarantee us success. It's not going to guarantee us a win, but working hard is going to increase those odds of winning. And a lot of nights, like I said, that was just a ton of defense. And I think some of his defensive fundamentals and drills, I think are things that carry to any level. And learned a ton of that. And it was just like buy into defense. Like, we're going to play pack line. We're not going to give you paint touches. We're going to force contested threes. And some of those things I think still stick with me, along with that quote I mentioned, like, you're going to do it through working hard. You're going to be disciplined. And, some of those things, I think he would always say, discipline before freedom is another one of his like things that still sticks with me to this day as well.
Yeah, I love that statement. And again, it's one when you think about what a good program is all about, right? Coaches often will talk about, I want my players to play free. I want them to play loose. But yet you have to have a structure in place to be able to allow that freedom to flourish. If you don't, then it's just, you're playing some glorified pickup basketball, which obviously nobody wants. You're not going to be very successful with that for very long. Growing up in small town Wisconsin, were you a multi-sport athlete, or were you always basketball right from that first opportunity, getting a chance to practice against your sister?
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the things I loved about, growing up in small town Wisconsin was the ability to play, multiple sports. And it was like, as, kid who wasn't an exceptional athlete, it was like I wanted the opportunity to compete in as many things as I could while I was still, young enough and physically able to do it. So yeah, I went on to play, or actually run cross country in the fall, and then it was basketball in the winter and baseball in the spring. So it was, awesome that the town, I think we needed, multiple sport athletes because we only had, 100 kids in each grade. So if you only had one sport athletes, like you simply couldn't have all the sports. So it was awesome to, coaches are, even the basketball coach, he's like trying to convince you, hey, we need you to go play other sports because we need a cross country team. We need a baseball team. And it was like getting to be able to compete all year round. It's just a competitor. It was awesome to be able to, shift one sport to the next and stay competitive all year round.
What did you learn from cross country and baseball that applied to your experience as a basketball player? Because oftentimes, and again, in cross country, there's not necessarily a role that you play, but baseball, just what are some things that you learned from playing those other sports that you were able to translate when you became a basketball player, when it transitioned into basketball season?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Mike. And I think we'll start with baseball. And the big thing there is like baseball coaches always tell you it's such a mental game. And I think that's true. And it's something I struggled with, I think, especially in like middle school and, freshman year of high school. It was like on the basketball court, you make a mistake and you compound it. And, basketball coaches hate that. So as a pitcher in baseball, like you learn real quick, if you walk a guy, you can't sit there and think about it for the next 3 batters. So I think that philosophy from baseball really carried over to basketball well. It was like, you make a mistake, yeah, mistakes are going to happen, but you got to move on from it. It's, the next play, next pitch, next batter mentality. We got to move on to the next thing. So I think that was big carrying over to basketball. And then in cross country, I think, honestly, the thing I learned most from that sport that carried over to basketball was just, like you said, it's an individual sport. Your role is just to run. It's a race. It's all on you. So I think that, the way cross country is, like, there's no one to blame. If you have a bad race, like, you're the only person you can blame. I can't blame a coach. I can't blame my teammate. I'm the one who wasn't ready to run the race. So I think that was really good to learn. It was just like, especially in basketball, I think there were times too, it's easy to point a finger at your teammate. It's easy to point a finger at the ref or your coach. But it's like, how about you look in the mirror? Like, a lot of times, maybe it was my fault. Maybe there was a messed up defensive coverage, whatever it was. But like, I think bringing that attitude over to basketball was helpful as well, because like I said, there's plenty of nights in the basketball court where it was my fault. And like, hey, you learn that from cross country. It's okay to just admit your mistakes. And I think it makes the whole team better.
Yeah, those are 2 really good examples. And I think clearly the transference from one sport to another, there's always, I think, benefit to being a multi-sport athlete, not only in the ways that you just described in terms of just lessons that you pick up from the sport, but also just in terms of the movements and the different things. And today, obviously, it's much, much more difficult than it's ever been to be able to play multiple sports in high school, which is one of those, it's just, in a lot of ways, it's a shame that kids don't get that experience. And so often as adults, the youth sports landscape kind of forces them into that one sport track because, hey, you got to be playing soccer year round, or you got to be playing basketball year round, or you got to be playing JO volleyball year round. And it gets tough for kids to be able to meet the demands of multiple sports. And then when you do have that many kids playing year round, the skill level of the game just continues to go up and up and up. And I'm sure that you see that as a coach, just the skill level of players today is higher than it's ever been in the history of the game, just because, again, kids are getting so much more, I think, better coaching at an earlier age, and they also just are getting so many opportunities to play. And so it's been interesting to look at how the youth sports landscape has changed. It's a conversation that we've had on the podcast before, just about how kids used to have more free play and more pickup, and now they're usually playing in a gym with a coach and with a parent in the stands and with a scoreboard, and just kind of how that impacts players in different ways. And for you on the women's side, I would have to guess that, looking at it from your perspective, that the opportunities for young women to be able to play the game of basketball, again, compared to the time when I was growing up 30, 35 years ago, I mean, it's astronomical, just the amount of opportunity that my 2 daughters have had to be able to play the game compared to a girl who was growing up at the same era in the late 70s, early 80s to try to play basketball as a female. The opportunities just weren't there. And I'm sure you see that coaching on the women's side, just how many opportunities there are for young women to be able to play.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy, like you mentioned. And I think it's, it's every sport. It's not bad. It's not just basketball. I think volleyball is another one where it's like, there's so many, young girls from, 3rd, 5th grade, like they're playing volleyball all year round. And I think it's awesome. Like you mentioned, they are able to get those opportunities with a coach from a young age. And I think, like you said, it's every sport. It's soccer, volleyball, softball is another big one for girls too. Like, there's so many softball, buildings and like things that, hey, we can go play in the winter, even up in Wisconsin. I got an indoor, batting cage or whatever it is. And like you said, it's raised the skill level for all things, which is awesome. But yeah, there's always cons to everything, right? And I think one downside of that is, there is less multi-sport athletes, which, stinks in some ways. But yeah, I think it has been awesome for each individual sport. And as a, someone on a college staff, it's like, yeah, you can see that, the AAU opportunities and the level of the high school play has gone up, which is exciting to see. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that the level of play in girls basketball, and I would argue in boys basketball too, it's just that the skill level has never been higher. When you look up and down a high school bench at the quality of players that high school teams have, it just dwarfs anything that was around 10, 15, 20 years ago in terms of the skill level of those players. Thinking back to your time as a high school player, what do you remember as your favorite memory? Do you have one that sticks out when you think about your time as a high school player?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the biggest thing that sticks out is just the fans and like the community support behind it. As I said, it wasn't a huge town, but like the one thing I think that the town really, really bought into was sports. And it was like, Coach John Myron got the program rolling when I was in high school, and we had, I think it was 2 20-win seasons in a row. And we went to, game before, we were one game away from going to the Kohl Center. And like some of those crowds I remember in that playoff run, it's just, it's awesome. You walk into, these big high school gyms and there's, 2,500 people there. And it was like, it's just sweet to see that support from, this whole community. And the town's only, 5,000 people in the whole town. And you have this many people showing up to a game. It was exciting. So I think just that support behind it, and the student section going crazy. A lot of my best buddies that weren't on the team were in the front row of that section going crazy for us. And some of those memories with all of them and the, family and friends was, I think, the thing I enjoyed the most about it and look back on.
Yeah, there's nothing better than a great high school environment when you start talking about the community packing the stands, the student section, and just as a player and even as a coach to be able to compete in that kind of environment at the high school level is extremely special. And obviously, as you get into your various state tournaments, crowds get a little bit bigger, people get a little bit more excited. And I just love when you get it to a high school gym like you described, and it's packed and both sides have fans and the communities they're supporting. There's really no better atmosphere in basketball than a packed high school gym and two rivals that are going at each other. So I can completely relate to that particular memory that you shared. It's one of my fondest memories, both as a player and then coaching at the high school level, when you get an opportunity to coach in an environment where the fans are right on top of you and both communities are there supporting and your kids are excited. And man, there's, from a high school basketball standpoint, sometimes I think because of today, there's so many different things for people to do that, in some places you don't always get the same level of crowds that maybe you got in the pre-internet, pre-cell phone era, where maybe people didn't have as much to do. But at the same time, when you do get an environment like that, I mean, it's something special for sure. When did coaching get on your radar? Obviously, your dad coached you when you were young. Was it something that you were thinking about from a young age, or was it something that started to cross your mind as your high school career is coming to an end? You're trying to figure out what you want to do for college. Just tell me a little bit about when coaching crossed onto your path.
Yeah, I think it started kind of, I'd say like 8th grade. I thought about it like, hey, maybe I would, want to do something like my dad. And at that point I was like, oh yeah, I'll just, get a job in this small town and probably coach, the JV team or whatever. Like that's what I was thinking at that point. And then it's funny you ask, because I think as I went on to high school, some of the high school teachers, junior, senior year, they'd ask, like the guidance coach would say, hey, Marty, what do you think you want to do? Like, what are you going to go to college for? And I think a lot of times I didn't have a good answer to that question. I was like, I don't know, like get a business degree, because that's what every kid says, right? And it was like, I actually have no idea what I want to do in college. So a lot of times when those teachers would ask me what I want to do, or my friends and family, I'd tell them coaching, because that's the only thing I was like, yeah, I think I want to do that. I didn't really want to be business. I really, there wasn't anything really calling my name, but I was like, something about coaching, I do think I want to do. But at that point, I didn't fully understand, like, hey, do I want to do it at college? Is it going to be, like I said, just taking like a JV middle school job and, having a different job at the, in my hometown. So yeah, I think that wasn't exactly sure. The cool opportunity that I really enjoy looking back on it was actually, so I graduated high school in 2020, and then that COVID year, right, shut us down really bad that spring as I was graduating high school. So I was planning on going to Minnesota for college that fall, but because of COVID, it got all shut down. Everything was online. So I decided to stay home that whole entire, freshman year of college. I was doing it online. So I had a cool opportunity that winter as part of like the backcourt club in my town. I was offered like to help or actually be the head coach for the 7th grade boys basketball team. So it was like, coaching kids, only 4 or 5 years younger than me. And it was like, I just got done playing. I really didn't know a darn thing. I was like basically going to these practices, running the same exact drills I just ran at the high school level, which was, good for these 7th graders. But it was like, I didn't have my own coaching philosophy or anything. I was just going in there running what I just ran in high school. But I think that experience that year, like really showed me this is what I want to do. I want to try to do it full time because I love it so much. And, once you decide, hey, I want to do this full time, your options kind of become college or pro, financially. So yeah, it was that winter where these kids, I really just bonded with them. And I saw like what a role model can be for these kids. And, I think it was cool because they already kind of look up to me and knew me from playing. You know, they just got done watching me the winter before play for this high school team. And now to be able to stay in the same hometown and coach a bunch of kids who, you know, at least heard of me from this, you know, high school team was pretty cool. And then I think as the year went on with this group, I just fell in love with it. And it wasn't the most talented group. You know, we were probably below 500, I guess. But I remember that last tournament when we were done and I tried to wrap up the season, you know, with the final year talk to them, like a lot of kids started tearing up. It was like I started tearing up talking to them because I was like, this is awesome. Like I had so much enjoyment, so much, you know, pride and just excitement from that season. I was like, I got to find a way to keep doing this. And then ended up going on to Minnesota that next fall as schools reopened. And, you know, I was able to get on with the, you know, just being a student manager with the women's team there. And it was, you know, kind of took off from there and just fell in love with it. But I think, like I said, I was kind of unsure throughout high school whether or not I really want to do it. And if so, what level? But I think that the year after I graduated high school, coaching that 7th grade team was like a huge, something I'll never forget with that, you know, that group of guys. And it's some of those, you know, kids and families I still talk to. And it's just like, I think that experience was really, really big for me.
All right. So I want to, before we jump to the Minnesota piece of it, let's go to this first team. It sounds like, and tell me if I'm reading this wrong, but what I get out of it is that what you really loved about coaching that first year was the impact and the connection that you were able to make with those kids. Would you say that was the number one thing that sold you on, hey, this is what I know, why I want to coach because of that? Or was it something else? Or maybe you just want to add on to sort of what I just said, but I get the sense that it's the impact and the relationships that what really sold you on coaching.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was the big thing. And as I kind of mentioned before with my dad, like that was the thing I thought he was good at, right? It wasn't necessarily the basketball X's and O's. So I think seeing that from my dad, and then it was like, yeah, in the first year there, like that is what I loved. I loved relating to the players. I loved the, you know, connection with them. And, you know, sometimes it was humor, you know, trying to bring some enjoyment, some laughter into practice at times while staying focused on what we were doing. And yeah, I think even the families, like some of those families are people I, you know, some, you know, like people I still know from that town and like mentors and people who have helped me out throughout these last few years. So yeah, and even every time I go home, it seems I get back in the gym with some of those kids, you know, like, hey, you want to get a workout in? So it's been cool to, you know, really build that relationship with those players. And yeah, as you said, it was definitely the impact in the relationship with the players. But I think beyond that, what really sold me on the idea of doing it full time was like, I hated losing. So it was like, I was having fun building a relationship with these players, but at the same time, we were going like 1-2 every tournament. And I was like, guys, we're below 500. Like, this is awesome, but we need to win some games. So I think it was the relationship. But yeah, at some point I was like, you know, I need to win some games. I'm so competitive. I want to keep doing this at a high level. I want to win some games while having the same impact on the players. So yeah, I think it was a mix of that, right? Like the losing some games motivated me, but it was also like, you know, I knew I could be better as a coach with the X's and O's, obviously, as time went, and then continue to build, just be a better relationship builder, be a better communicator with the players. So.
All right. So talk about growing your knowledge as a coach, as you said, and I can totally vouch for this, that when you come in after just finishing your playing career and you start running a practice, I was exactly the same way as you. My first coaching job after I got done playing was coaching a JV basketball team. And I remember I walked in the first day and I'm like, man, what am I going to do here? And basically I did what my high school coach did and I did what my college coach did. And the drills that the two of them did, that's what I did. I really didn't think there was any other way to do it. I really didn't know there was any other way to do it. And to be honest with you, I just kind of stayed with that. I wish I would have had somebody in my ear back then saying, hey, you need to go and study the game and maybe do some more just figuring out who you are and what there are other ways of doing things. And I just kind of went about and did the things that I had experienced as a player. So I can completely relate to that. So what did you do as you started to look around and think, hey, I've got to expand my knowledge as a coach? What were some of the first things that you tried to do to become a better coach as you sort of realized like, hey, I gotta expand beyond just what my high school coach did?
Yeah, it's funny you said that because like you said, I put zero thought into it that season. Like, hey, how am I going to plan a practice? Like some of those things now you realize like it's so important, like the preparation and the planning to plan a good practice. And it's like then I don't know, like we're going to do this drill, and this drill, and if it hopefully it goes well, and then we'll scrimmage at the end. Yeah. So yeah, I think the big thing, as I mentioned, was just going to Minnesota to be a manager. And I was planning on going there from the start, but once I got there, I was like, hey, I need to get on one of these staffs. And you heard about other stories of people going to be a manager. And I was like, I really think this is the way to do it. Like, I want to get some experience at a high level. So, going to a Big Ten school, it was like, there's, 2 great coaches, 2 great programs right here. And it was like men's or women's, it doesn't really matter to me, but I want to be a manager on one of the 2. So, I called up the men's program for a little bit. They didn't have, an opening managing spot that year. They kind of sent me to the women's and said, hey, this is going to be a great opportunity. Like, I think you'd enjoy this. So, a day later, I was in the women's offices, quick interview with them, and I was able to hop on as a manager that season with them. And never looked back. And I think that staff is, incredible looking, or from a head coach, Lindsay Whalen, like a Hall of Fame player. So, her basketball knowledge is insane, through the roof there from Lindsay. And then under her, that first year was, Carly Thibault-Dudanis, someone who just won 30 games last year as a Division I head coach. You had Shimmy Gray Miller, 25-year Power 5, mostly Power 5. She's been all over, the country coaching Division I basketball. So then you got her, and then the last one was Kelly Curry, like another great mind, someone who was super loyal to Minnesota and, spent years and years there. So I think that program and that staff was like just an exceptional place to start because they were all great people and they were all willing to show me, like they were willing to give me some, sometimes it was just answering my questions, right? Like, hey, why are we doing this? Like, what's the thought behind this coverage? Why are we going to try this against, Penn State or, Wisconsin, whoever it was, in some of these scouting reports, and just really trying to be a sponge there and learning, everything they said, everything they taught, everything they, preached and practiced. It was like trying to take it all in. And like I said, I don't think I could have had a better staff to learn from those first 2 years at Minnesota, because they were, really great people, really willing to show me the ropes a little bit and just teach me what all the knowledge that they had throughout the years.
How much, I don't want to say access is maybe not the right word, but how much were you able to kind of get behind the scenes of practice? Like, were you ever able to sit in on like a practice plan meeting or just a film session? How much of that kind of stuff were you able to sit and be a part of?
Yeah, it was tough with class, but I could, did as much as I always could. And I think the second year I was there, garnered some trust with the first year, and they were giving me some more responsibilities. So yeah, I was able to sit on, plenty of film sessions, the scouting reports that the coaches would give them to the players, And then as the year went on, that my senior year at Minnesota, Shimmy was a big help, and she would just, like, she let me watch a bunch of Purdue games. I remember before we played them, and she was like, you're going to sit down with me and talk about how we're going to scout Purdue. And it was, again, like, she didn't have to do that. And to be honest, like, that scouting report I gave her was probably terrible, but it was like, hey, Shimmy, here's some things I think, I've watched 2 or 3 games of Purdue and like had some, just some simple tendencies, some plays that they're going to run and stuff. And it was, again, like, you sit down with her and you realize how much you don't know. And it's like, okay, like, I thought I put some effort into this and I'm sure it was fine, but it was like, then you look at what she has and what actually has to be given to the team at a Big Ten level. And it's like, yeah, like, I might know this, but there's still 1,000 other things that you still are to learn. So yeah, learning a ton from those coaches, like I said, giving me some responsibility and just freedom to continue to learn from them in the film sessions. And yeah, it was cool to get behind the scenes with some of that. And the other thing I really enjoyed at Minnesota was the individual film sessions that they let me be a part of a lot. So it was just, sitting down with one coach and one player, and you realize like how much, I think you learn a ton of that too as a player is trying to learn from a coach, and you're kind of sitting there right alongside them, learning as well. So that was a big thing too.
What would you say when you started there and you started kind of getting this basketball education from the coaching staff? What's an area that you feel like you knew the least about in terms of X's and O's that was really eye-opening when you sat down and you're like, man, I didn't realize that this much went into it? I'm sure there was a lot of different areas that probably could be true, but when you think about the area that you grew the most in terms of just your knowledge of what it means to be a coach and the X's and O's side of it, does one area stand out maybe more than the other?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a pretty simple answer for me was ball screen offense. Because like I said, playing for a small town, like old school coach under the Bennett tree, like he was running, like I said, it was a ton of defense. And then offensively, it was like, hey, we're just going to do dribble drive motion. And if we don't have anything, like, we had fortunate to have one really good player. So at the end of the shot clock, or we didn't have a shot clock, my bad, but I mean, like, after a few rotations, if we didn't have anything, it was like, give the ball back to our best player. We're all going to space the floor and we're going to hope he has something. Like, there wasn't a ton of ball screens, wasn't a ton of plays. So going to Minnesota, it was like, yeah, I think the big thing was ball screen offense and all that goes into it, right? Like just the simple things that every coach preaches, like being patient. Can we set the screen with a good angle? Like what's our different solutions against each coverage? Like what are we going to do if, versus a hedge, ice, switch? So all those, the terminology and then some of the solutions to the defensive coverages were definitely the biggest things I learned, I think, at Minnesota, especially playing, Lindsay Whalen, she's a Hall of Fame point guard. So like her ball screens was as good as anyone, in the WNBA. So it was awesome to learn from her, an exceptional player, and then teaching that to some of the good guards at Minnesota as well.
At this point, you're completely sold that college basketball is kind of where you want to be as you're going through this process of being a manager at Minnesota? Or was it more a case of, hey, when I graduate, I'm just going to look at the opportunities that are presented to me, which I know you've had some pro experience too, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, but just what's your thought process as you're heading towards graduation in terms of looking for a job and the conversations maybe you had with the staff?
Yeah. I think the staff, like you mentioned there at the end, was a huge part of it, right? Is talking to them throughout the year, especially that last year with Shimmy and Kelly, were the two big assistants helping me along that whole journey. And yeah, I think it was definitely staying college at that point. I think the next step gradually for a lot of managers is that GA position. So yeah, a lot of it was talking to them and trying to, get some experiences those last 2 semesters at Minnesota, learning, things that they knew and that they thought were going to be helpful for me to get a position. So like I said, that, simple scouting report I did for Shimmy, that was one of those things she told me, hey, if you can have just a little bit of experience, watching a team and putting together some of this, personnel stuff, and there's simple, some of the basic plays they're going to run, that stuff's going to separate you from a few other managers around there looking for similar type of jobs. So yeah, it was awesome with Kelly as well, giving me some opportunities with, individual player workouts and stuff like that. So them two were big. And yeah, I think it was deciding at that point, I think I wanted to stay in college, and I thought GA was the next, logical road at that point.
What's the best piece of advice you could give to somebody who is graduating from a school, has been a manager for several years at that school, something that you learned from your experience that if you were going to share a piece of advice with somebody who's currently in your position that you were in a year or two ago, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think this might come across a little cliche, but I think it's you really have to work hard for the staff you're with. I think there's people, especially managers, it's your first time in. I get it. You're excited, you're young, you want to think about the next opportunity, you want to think about the future. I think that's natural. But I think for me, it was really trying to just I'm so blessed to be at a Big Ten school learning from this staff. I got to quit thinking about what the future might hold. I'm just going to go in here every day, excited to be here, pumped up to learn, from the staff and the players. And I think that was a big thing. Just bust your butt for the staff you're with, and everything else is going to work out in the end. If that staff you're with enjoys you, they appreciate you, they respect, who you are as a person, they respect your character. I think they should be able to put their nose out there for you and hopefully help you get a GA position or whatever else whenever that first position might be for you. But I think, it's just bust your butt for the staff you're with, and I think everything else will work itself out.
Did you function as a practice player at all at Minnesota? I know you mentioned that off the top. Was that something that you got an opportunity to do, something that you wanted an opportunity to compete, or what was that like if you had an opportunity to do that?
Yep. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to do that. That was a lot of fun, kept practices interesting. And, they're really good. You learn real quick. I remember that first scrimmage against them, I was like, holy shit, I guess, they're legit. So, yeah, but I was able to do that for both my years as a manager there. And I think you learn a lot, too, from that experience, playing. And part of it, like I said, coming from Wisconsin without the shot clock, it was some of it, you realize the importance of that shot clock. To me, I remember one of the first things I thought playing against them was at the end of the shot clock, I can go take a risk defensively. In the state of Wisconsin, there's no time. I can't go for a steal and just get burnt. But if there's 3 seconds on the shot clock, I'm going to go try to get a steal and an open layup on the other end, because if I get burnt, they might not even have enough time to, some of those simple things I think you learn better when you're doing it yourself, not just watching it on TV. So some of those things, it was really awesome to be a practice player and learn on the court as well.
It's interesting that you talk about the shot clock piece of it, because I went down, and most people who are listening to the podcast know that my son's a freshman this year at Ohio Wesleyan. And so obviously here in the state of Ohio, no shot clock in high school basketball. So that's what I've been used to watching, especially watching him play with no shot clock. And then I went down and watched the scrimmage, and I'm watching it and I'm not paying any attention to the shot clock. And there's, okay, here's the possession. It's going, the ball's getting reversed. Things are happening. The offense is moving, whatever. And then all of a sudden somebody's chucking up like a 26-footer. And I'm like, then I got to look at, oh yeah, there's a shot clock. You had to get the shot up. I'm like, why are we throwing away this possession? And then you just realize like what a difference, what a difference that makes. It's kind of crazy. Just
where
again,
do you
the
fall
impact
on
that it has.
Where do you fall in that debate, Mike? You think there should be a shot clock in every state?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's no question that it makes the game better. We've all probably been around games and coaches where you just have somebody that's holding the ball, and nobody wants to watch that. Nobody wants to play in that. And then I've had a lot of interesting conversations, Marty, on the pod with different guys that have talked about some of the ramifications of the shot clock. And like, I talked to Rob Bros too. He's a coach at Bolingbrook High School in Illinois. He has a really good team. His team's, one of the best teams in the state of Illinois. And he always talks about the fact that people say, well, of course you want a shot clock. Your team's super talented. You play really fast. And, the more possessions there are, the easier it's going to be for you to score. And it's just going to allow you to just kill even more teams. And he's always like, yeah, but it just has this impact on, we can't do some of the things that we want to do defensively. And there's a lot more, it's a lot more complex than just, hey, it's a 30-second clock that's up there and we got to get it done within that 30 seconds. There's a lot of nuance to it at the end of games in terms of, do you foul? And then you're talking about high school, and obviously women's college basketball, you have the quarters. So there's strategy at the end of quarters when it comes to the shot clock. And there's just all these little complexities that I think makes the game more interesting. And the bottom line is, look, when you're playing, you want to play more possessions. You want to play and get up and down the floor. And nobody wants to play in a game, whether you're the team holding the ball or you're the team that's the ball is being held against. That's just not fun basketball. And I think it seems like it should be a lot easier than it is to just adopt nationwide. Like the National Federation of High Schools should just say, hey, let's mandate the shot clock and every school can figure it out. I mean, you always hear the argument of, oh, it's going to cost too much money and we don't have somebody to operate it. And we have a hard enough time getting people to do the scorebook and operate the regular scoreboard and all this. And it just feels like, come on, we have so many things going on in so many different sports that you can't tell me that there's not a way to figure it out and make the rules uniform across the United States, especially when every other single level of basketball across the world has the shot clock. To me, it just feels like it's a no-brainer. And it's amazing that we're in the year 2024. We still don't have it. And, I think we're approaching maybe half the states are either have it or are going to adopt it at some point. So to me, it just feels like it should be a no-brainer.
Yeah. Yep.
Hey, coaches, we know you're invested in the next generation of athletes, so why not give them the star treatment this season with Game Changer, a free app that provides you with the tools to help your players improve. Review game film, game stats, and cumulative season statistics with your team to keep players motivated all season long. Live stream your games for free and enjoy automatic highlight clips. Download Game Changer now on iOS or Android. Game Changer equips your team with the tools they need to stay engaged. Download it today and make this season one for the books. Game Changer. Stream, score, connect. Learn more at gc.com/hoopheads. That's gc.com/hoopheads. All right, tell me about the job search after you graduate from Minnesota. What's the process like? Who are you talking to? How are you getting the word out that you're looking for a job? Just walk me through the steps that you took after graduation to try to find a position.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think fortunate enough, I was able to get that position secured before graduation. So I know that can be a stressful thing for a lot of people graduating, is like you graduate, you think, oh, I should have a job. Like a lot is on your mind. So I think, really thankful to the Minnesota staff to help me get one before I graduated. I think that relieved some stress, which was good. So the big thing was like up to the Final Four, just talking to Shimmy and Kelly and Lindsay as well, Melissa Maines, Adobo, like a lot of those Minnesota connections, people I've been working for the last 2 years. They were a huge help, the whole way through. And then Shimmy and Kelly both throughout the year helped me like, hey, Marty, I think you should introduce yourself to, this Big Ten coach. Marty, hey, this is someone I've recruited with on the road before. Like maybe you want to introduce himself. So I think that was a big help. And one of those connections, actually, one of the Illinois assistants my senior year was Ryan Gensler, who just so happened to get the Akron head job, a few months later. So I was able to meet him he came to the barn to play at Minnesota. So met him that night. Nothing crazy, just, I was able to talk to him for a few minutes after the game. That's someone who Shimmy worked with at Florida. So, went to the Final Four, and I was actually at the Final Four when I heard he got the job. And that's, when a lot of the networking's going on. So I was fortunate, again, through Shimmy's help and the other Minnesota connections, Lindsay was a big help, Kelly, all of them, Carly as well. So I was able to get on the phone with Gensler I think it was the day after the Final Four. And I had a conversation with him, and we were able to keep talking the next few weeks, and he offered me the job. And then I wanted to I think it's a good experience for kids to talk to some different schools and try to, just the whole experience of job searching, the interview, all that. So as those weeks were going on, I talked to a few other schools, a few other Big Ten programs that I, had a few connections with through my time in the Big Ten. And, some opportunities I was excited about, but I think in the end, the way Gensler, he just kept calling, and he was he's a great relationship builder, great communicator. And I think from the start, he was able to sell hey, Marty, I went down the same path you did 15 years ago. He was a practice player. He went on to be a GA. He took an assistant low major job, and he kept climbing the ranks. He was a video coordinator, something that, I thought would probably help me down the road. So he just continued to sell who he was, the culture he was going to build at Akron. And again, I think the journey, like I said, I think I'm going to hopefully follow somewhat of a similar journey to him. And I think the way he sold that and the way he communicated that with me on those phone that few weeks was no other head coach was spending the time to do that. So it was really, awesome to get to know him, and just some of those first phone calls I remember of him really trying to sell himself, the program. And I think he did a great job of it. And I think it's, a great reason why he's an exceptional recruiter, is I think he's just great communicator, great at all those things I just mentioned. So yeah, I ended up settling with him a few weeks later, right before I graduated. So it worked out well.
All right. Talk about the role that you have there as a graduate assistant. What are your responsibilities day to day? What are some of the things that you need to do in terms of your role on the staff?
Yep. Yeah. I think last year when I first got here, a lot of it was the video stuff, as I mentioned. He kind of said that in those first phone calls, hey, we need a video guy. We don't have a full-time video coordinator, at Akron. So you're going to be that guy for me. And that's another reason why I was excited to get here, is because from the start, he said, we don't have a huge staff like a Power 5 program. We're going to need you to do some of these things from the beginning, which I was really, really excited about. So yeah, I started with a lot of video, breaking down all the practices and then trying to do some analytics with it. So, statting everything from the preseason practices and trying to put together some reports of hey, here's some things we got to work on. I remember last fall, a lot of it was we kept talking about paint touches, and I got curious, okay, how much more efficient are we actually with a paint touch? So started statting some of those things, hey, what's our points per possession when we get a paint touch versus not in every practice? How much more effective are we when we get, multiple reversals? So I was statting, every time we get a reversal across the midline. And then it got to the point where we were hey, maybe some of our guards are over dribbling. So it's start statting, how many times are we dribbling every possession? And I got really comfortable with Sports Go, and that's what I spent, a ton of time on that last year on that program, trying to learn all those things, on Sports Go to keep it simple. So you're not doing old school, statting on a notebook.
Right.
So I think learning that program was big the first year. And then as the year went on, he started to give me more responsibilities as he, trusted me. So it was, running some of my own player development workouts, doing a large part of the scout with the assistants, whether it was the personnel section or helping with, play calls, ball screen coverage, whatever it was. So helping the assistants big time with the scout. And then a lot of it was just whatever else was needed, right? Small staff. I think some days it was breaking up recruiting film, send to the coaches on a potential recruit, or, helping make a quick graphic for a recruit, or, simple things like that around the office, like a little operations thing. But I think a lot of it was the film stuff and then some analytics along with that as the season went on. I was really fortunate last year to get some experience with the player development as well. because I think that, gets you on the court, gets you building that relationship with the players, which was awesome. Something I really enjoyed too. So it's a good group of players, and I enjoyed working with them all. So that was awesome.
All right, we'll jump to that player development piece in just a second. What was the learning curve like in terms of the video? How long did it take you before you felt comfortable and you're like, hey, I know what I'm doing? And you could just do what you needed to do as opposed to trying to learn the program. How long did that take?
A good amount of time. I'd say 3 to 4 weeks probably. I remember last year there was a lot of days where I'd leave the office in September and it was like, what did I get done today? And you look back, it's like, oh, you spent 8 hours trying to learn this program. And it was like some days it felt like long and tiring, whatever. But I think it definitely worked out in the end because, you spent some of those long days in September learning how to do it all. But as the year went on, my efficiency in sports code, helped big time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I would think once you get past the learning to sort of build the framework of the program and understanding what to do, and then you can actually go and do the work that you're supposed to be doing. And then you can share, as you said, being able to break some of that stuff down and share it with your coaching staff, I'm sure was tremendously valuable to them. Again, to have somebody who's in that film room and being able to do that. How much did you learn by spending all that time with the film? Because that's one of the things that's kind of been sort of a universal theme that we've been able to talk with lots of people on the podcast who have been video coordinators. They just talk about just kind of the exponential growth of their basketball X and O knowledge, just because, again, you're not only watching film of your own team, but you're obviously breaking down film of opponents. So it's kind of like taking a master class and you're just sitting there with the video and learning. Just tell me a little bit about how you approach that and how much you felt you grew as a coach in terms of your X's and O's knowledge just by being in the film room and exposed to the variety of different coaching styles and teams and games and all the things that you were able to watch over the course of the last season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a ton. And as you mentioned, some of it is watching other teams as well. Like you learn, hey, what's this coach teaching? Why did he make this adjustment in the second half? Like, why do I think he went to more hedge or whatever the, coverage, adjustments were, whether it was matchup. So yeah, you learn a ton from that point. And I think the analytical thing last year was like a big opener too, because you always hear coaches talk about like, hey, we need paint touches. But it's like, until you start tracking it, you don't realize like how much you actually need paint touches. And it's like something as simple as that. Like you start looking at it, it's like, guys, our offense is 2 times better if we get a paint touch. There's games where it's really that crazy. And you start telling the players, you start telling the girls, like, it's, Coach Gunter's not just saying this to say it. Like, some of these simple basketball things that every coach says, the analytics, when it backs it up, it's like, okay, like we really do need to reverse the ball to 3 sides. We really do need to get a paint touch. We really do need to quit over dribbling. So I think some of those things too, like when I think that helped the girls as well when they were able to see some numbers like, hey, so yeah, definitely helped a ton basketball wise. And as I said, I think sometimes the analytics last year were an eye opener for me to like really support some of those simple basketball things that every coach says.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's one thing I always go back to my experience as a player. And so I'm playing college basketball from 1988 to 1992. So a long time ago. And
yep.
A lot of the stuff that coaches talk about and the paint touches and the analytics and all that stuff really didn't exist in my day. And like, obviously we didn't film practice the way that clearly every Division I school and a lot of schools at lower divisions film practice and review that and go through it and stat it and all that kind of stuff. And I never experienced any of that. So it was like coach would say something and you just would kind of nod your head and either you believe it or you don't. And there wasn't necessarily any statistics to back it up. So to your point, to be able to have somebody say something and then be like, yeah, well, it's not just empty talk. There's actually statistics behind it. And here's why this is important. And to me, I think that's one of the things that when you think about players today, there's often that feeling that they want to know the why behind things a lot more than players, again, old guys like me that played kind of in the era where it was my way or the highway. You just did what you were told and you didn't really question it. Now I think players really want to understand the why. And I think coaches appreciate the ability to share the why because it gets everybody on the same page. So it's just a different way of looking at it. I can certainly see the value in being able to share with the players, hey, this is why this is important. And then that goes to what you talked about next, which is from a player development standpoint, right? You can even take some of those things that you learn that are relevant to the team, and now you can incorporate some of that into, hey, we need you to be able to work on this particular skill, because if we get this accomplished, that leads to even more team success. So tell me a little bit about how you and the staff at Akron, how do you guys put together your player development plan, both for the off season and in season? Then how did your role fit into that?
Yep. Yeah, good question. Coach Gensler, as I kind of mentioned, he was a video coordinator, big analytical guy for Florida back in 2012. So he, gets that whole scene and he loves the numbers behind it. And thankfully, all of our assistants buy into that stuff as well. So as you mentioned, it kind of started in the, season wraps up and we spent a lot of time like, hey, obviously we watched the film all year long. We've, recapped all the games. So then it's each coach, is assigned a group of players. And then I think it was, going back and watching, maybe it's all their shots, all their turnovers that I think we did as a staff to break up, hey, like what are some of their tendencies, just from the film. And then you put the numbers with it. So then, we're going into just play. We're going into, some of the reports I helped, put together. And it was like, hey, this person, maybe they had a problem over dribbling and, they're a lot better on the right side of the floor with their shot chart, than the left. And it was putting some of those numbers along with it. And then, the coaches, along with my help, on some of those reports, put together, it's usually like a 4 to 5 page sheet. And, some of it's as simple as, hey, what are your goals for next season? So getting some of the player input is, on the first page, where do you see yourself in a year? What do you want? Like, how do you think you can expand your role going into next year? So some really good thought-provoking questions, I think, to challenge the players about how they want to grow going into the next year. And then the next 3 or 4 pages kind of break down like, hey, here are some of your numbers in transition. And then we'll have film clips to back it up. So maybe it says, hey, in transition, you were super, super efficient. You were one of the best women in the MAC for, getting to the rim in transition. And then, show them a few clips of that. And then, now we're going to break down your 3-point shot. Hey, maybe you were below average from 3, off the dribble, but you were way above average catch and shoot. Something we looked at as well. Like what's the difference analytically on catch and shoot versus off the dribble threes? Some stuff like that. And I think, again, as you mentioned, these women are really smart. Like they're asking the right questions. They're saying, hey, why? Like, why are you telling me this? Why do I have to work on this? So when you can give them numbers and film, I think that's when you can get the full buy-in. Like, hey, they're right. I was really bad off the dribble threes, but I was 40% catch and shoot. So like either I got to stop taking the off the dribble ones, or I got to just find a way in their offense to create more catch and shoot. And some of that comes down to like in the player development again, it's like going back to the film. Like maybe we can create you 2 more catch and shoot threes a game if you move off the ball better. So some of that stuff I think is really big when you can give them numbers and film. And again, we break down, it's like every part of offense, and then there's a defensive section. So it's like transition, 3-point, at the rim, mid-range, like in the ball screen. And then it goes to defense, and it's like, how are you guarding the ball screen, whether you're a post or a guard? And then, how are you one-on-one in space? And then, if you're a post, like how'd you guard post-ups? So kind of break it down each, segment of the game, I guess you would say, and then trying to put film and numbers together to get some full buy-in from the team.
Yeah, to be able to have both of those pieces of quote-unquote evidence to be able to share with players when you're having that conversation, when you're out on the floor with them trying to work and get them better and get them to see like, hey, this is where what you do fits in. This is how it's going to help you to be a better player and how it's ultimately going to impact what we do as a team. How much are you on the floor with your group in the summertime, like in an average week? How much time are you individually spending with your group during those player development sessions? Obviously there's the NCAA has limits on what you can and can't do, but just for you yourself, how much time are you on the court with your group of players?
Yep. So good question. This summer I was actually gone with the Sparks, which I'm sure we'll get to, but the assistants, as I said, we broke them down each coach has 4 or 5 players in their group. And the individual plans we put together like is super, super individualized. So the assistants would spend, I want to say it was 3 45-minute sessions they had with each player each week. So it was, what is that, 2:15? Is that the right math, I think? So yep. 2 hours, 15 minutes a week. Good double check there. So yeah, it would be 2 hours, 15 minutes a week, with the individual player. And again, it's super individualized. Here's your plan. Here's your film. Here's some of your analytics. And it's just one-on-one with a player, a coach, and a manager, manager rebounding. And then, the coaches are, they know their group as good as anyone. So just spending a ton of time, Gensler and the assistants have all really bought into that. Like, not only do we have to recruit good players, but we got to continue to develop them. Like, I think that's going to get you to the higher level and, at each conference. So really buying into the individual stuff. And like I said, it was, 2 hours, 15 minutes a week they'd go with each player. So.
Got it. Tell me about balancing your time as a GA between your responsibilities as a graduate student and your responsibilities to the staff, and just give me a rundown of sort of your daily schedule and how you kind of kept yourself afloat going through those two things.
Fortunately, I was able to find a MBA, which I think was a good fit for me. That was all online. So that was a big thing, is I never had to miss any basketball thing for classes because I could do it whenever I wanted. And, I think the Minnesota degree did prepare me well for this MBA. I took a finance degree at Minnesota. So fortunately, I haven't found the classes like overly challenging, which I'm glad, because like I said, I've been all in on the basketball side of it. But it's tough. There's some days where you get home at, 8, 9 o'clock or whatever it is from a, late practice, or you're getting an individual player workout in late night. And it's like you get home and you got 2 assignments to fill out, and it's not what you want to do every night. But you got to get through it, and it's all for the, greater plan. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to figure out the balance. I'm sure being able to do it online, like you said, provides you with that flexibility, and then you can kind of pick and choose your times. I'm sure that tremendously makes it much, much easier than if you're going to a traditional classroom every day at a certain time where you just couldn't be with the staff or couldn't be with the team at those times. So to be able to have that flexibility, I'm sure was tremendously valuable. You mentioned the Sparks opportunity. Tell me how that happens. Who do you connect with there to get that opportunity that you had to work as with the video coordinating, in LA with the Sparks?
Yeah, so it actually started, kind of the connection built initially from my time at Minnesota. So Carly Thibault-Dudanis, my first year at Minnesota, was the associate head coach there. And obviously her family, both her dad and her brother, were on the Mystics staff, head coach and assistant at that time. And then Mike transitioned to a GM role, and Eric took over as head coach. So that after it was my first year as a manager at Minnesota, Carly helped me connect with Mike and Eric. So I got to meet him at the Final Four that year. It was in Minneapolis, and then I was able to go out to DC. So I spent 5 weeks with the Mystics. That was the summer of 2022. Spent about 5 weeks with them, just learning from that staff. And, it was just incredible to just be a sponge there and see what basketball was like at a professional level. So then actually the head video coordinator that summer for the Mystics, got to know him really well. I had an idea I was going to try to get into some of the film stuff. So learned from him. And then he's still on staff with the Mystics, and he was able to actually connect me with the Sparks guy. And it kind of, I was blessed, I was super blessed with that connection, through Carly to the Mystics, and then the Mystics guy to LA, and, Curt, a Hall of Fame coach. So it was one of his long time. Started out as a video coordinator, was promoted to assistant. So that's the guy who I initially got connected with. And just super blessed to be able to work for such a, highly respected, high level, incredible mind, incredible person with Curt Miller. So.
But what's the difference between a college video room and a pro video room in your mind?
Good question. I think, the biggest transition, I think, overall from college to the pros is just the practice time. And I think that relates to the video room, because it's like, especially preseason, I think we had a 10-day training camp before the season started, right? So it's just crazy. And then as the season starts, you're playing a game every other day. So it was like the film stuff, it was even more important, I think, because you couldn't teach on practice. Like in college, the next day after a tough loss, you can get right back on the court and have a full practice, right? And at the WNBA, it's just really hard because you're playing another game in 24 hours. So it's like you can't practice for 2 hours, let alone an hour and a half. Like your practice has got to be short. You got to keep the legs fresh. It's on to the next game. It's on to the next scouting report as soon as whether you get a great win or a tough loss. So for the video room, I think that affects you a lot, because it's like, it's quick transitions. It's getting clips together quick, late at night. And then you got to spend a lot of time, just showing clips to the players, whether that's individual or as a team. But, at the W level, you just watch way more film than you do at the college level, because college level, you can teach on the court. At the pros, a ton of it has to be taught on film so they can save their legs. So I think, obviously that changes the whole video room a little bit, because it's just got to be more film. It's got to be organized. Like, those W players are smart. They know, like, if you just give them a random group of film, like, they're going to be, what's this? And like, what's the point of it? So I think you got to make sure it's organized. There's got to be a message behind it. I think it's got to be individualized for the player. And so some of those things, I think, it's just a huge difference when you can't teach a ton on the court. It's finding great ways and great clips and content. Sometimes it's analytics as well, trying to pair those to try to, teach and motivate and, get confidence to the players on the film.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your experience with the players in terms of their work ethic, their professionalism, their intangibles, the things that make them pro players. This is one of the questions that I always think is interesting to hear what somebody who's been exposed to players at the pro level, whether it's WNBA or NBA, just in terms of what separates the players that get to that level. And obviously, again, the basketball skill, and there's athleticism and all the things that we think about, but just what are some of the intangible things that you noticed about players playing at that level for the Sparks?
I honestly think the biggest thing is like mental, and it's a mentality to, hey, I need to work hard. But not only that, I think it's like they're confident. They're really, really confident, and they're really, really great at getting over like a mistake. At that level, you're still going to make mistakes. Just because they're in the WNBA doesn't mean they're perfect, right? Mistakes are going to happen. But I think those players in the W were exceptional, like really, really exceptional at moving on to the next play. And it's like, you don't see too many players in the W like turning it over and then freaking out. And I think sometimes at college you see that, and it's like, we got to move on. You can't turn one mistake into three. And I think and that goes to shooting as well. Like, I think the W players are just exceptional, confident at all times. Like, if they're a shooter and they miss 4, it doesn't matter. The 5th one's going up without hesitation, and it's probably going to go in. So I think that mental thing of just being ultra confident at all times and being able to recover from a mistake was the biggest intangible. It's like just incredible. And as I said, the turnarounds, you're playing every 48 hours a lot of weeks, and it's like, some players can go 1 for 10, one night, and 48 hours later they're having 30. And it's like that. I think that confidence and ability to turn over the next play, next game was really, really, cool to see.
How do the players at that level, when you're sitting down with them and sharing film as a staff with the players, what's their process like? Maybe not necessarily for analyzing things from a team aspect, but more when they're looking at their own performance. What are some of the things that they do in terms of self-analysis? Because I feel like one of the things that separates a pro athlete from an amateur athlete is just that ability to be able to self-diagnose of, hey, here's something a mistake that I made, or maybe I noticed something that, I had that bad night shooting, and maybe there's something that I can quickly assess in my form, or I can be out on the floor and I can be going through a shooting workout. Maybe it's not going well, and you have a college player, a high school player, and it goes from bad to worse. But like you said, with a WNBA player, an NBA player, they're able to kind of self-diagnose and figure that out. So I don't know if you had any experience with players like that who were able to kind of quickly figure things out that maybe weren't going well, and all of a sudden they were able to self-analyze and get themselves back on track, if that question makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it does. It's a good question. It's a tough one, but I get what you mean. And I think the one thing I would say on that is their ability to, you show a player a clip at the W level, very, very few from what I experienced, they're never going to give you an excuse. If they do, it's very rare. And I think sometimes in college, certain players who maybe lack some confidence, like you show them a clip of them, maybe not doing exactly what you want as a staff. And I think sometimes players at the college level have a tendency to be like, well, yeah, I kind of messed that up, but my teammate also did this, which made me do this. And that's really why it got messed up or whatever. Where at the W level, those women they know, and like they're smart enough. They're so smart that like if you show them a clip, they're going to be like, yeah, that's on me. And they're going to snap out of it quick. Some of it, I think, is just recognizing that, hey, like I'm not going to sit and dwell on it. I'm not going to try to make an excuse. I'm not, it's on me. I get it. My mistake. And it's immediately snap of the finger, like on to the next one. And, I think a lot of that comes from preparation. Like they've been playing at the highest level for years and years. And I think when you continue to do that, you become smart enough to know, hey, that was my mistake, but I'm confident that I've overcome worse struggles in the past, and there's going to be no different in 48 hours. I'm going to go get buckets on whoever the next team is. So I think that was a big thing, is just rarely you're going to hear him make a mistake. It's, yep, I get it. I'll be better. I'll be better next game.
What do you take back from that experience with the Sparks as you head back to Akron this fall and into this season? What's something that you learned, that you picked up, that is going to make you better at your job at Akron this year?
I think, I could sit here and talk about for way too long about the basketball stuff you learn, right? The X's and O's is incredible. Learning from Curt Miller and that staff, it's insane. So just some of the adjustments, the plays, the counters, like all that stuff, for sure. Learned a ton. That'll be helpful for years to come in my career. But I think the big thing, not necessarily X's and O's, is like the player relationship of it, and how I think that can really be, I think college coaches can continue to use that approach at the college level. I think at the W level, it was like the players and coaches are truly seen on the same level, right? Because we're both, everyone on the staff, every player, they're adults. So I think it's like a true adult to adult relationship, like it's peer to peer. And I think in some of those film sessions I talked about, like the players sometimes are teaching the coaches, or they're teaching each other. Like there were times we'd pull up a clip and one of the veterans would be like, yeah, let me explain this. Or like, yeah, here's what happened. Like this, I'm going to teach it to this rookie, or maybe the rookie. I think there's a lot of healthy debate on like how they can get better as a team. And I think that goes as well to individual stuff. Like the players, they're super smart. And as a coach, you have to respect that. And you can't come in there like, oh, I know more than you. It's like, no, you probably don't. They've been playing at the highest level for 15 years or whatever. Like they know as much, if not more than, they're incredibly smart. So I think using that approach to college, especially these days, is like in the NIL, in the portal world, it's going towards that, almost like semi-pro athletics. So I think that's something I still got things to learn and still trying to figure it all out, but like giving a voice to the players, because these players at Akron are smart too. And it's like hearing what one of the assistants at the Sparks would always tell me, like, we're not out there feeling what they feel. As much as we watch film, we don't know what the players are going through on the court. And she'd be really smart. Like she'd just ask the players, what's going on? Like, how are we struggling with this ball screen coverage? And sometimes you get a better answer from a player than you might a coach, because a coach wasn't out there doing it. So I think that view on things from her, Nola Henry, like that view was really beneficial for me to hear. And it was like, sometimes, just ask the player, like, what's going on in this? Like, I could show you 4 clips of it, but you're going to know better than me how it actually felt in the game. So explain it. And I think some of that thing, the player relationship and, the teaching, trying to do it peer to peer and like really on the same level as them. I think players feel more motivated by that in this world too. Like not necessarily just getting yelled at. It's like, hey, I'm right along with you in this ride. I'm going to do whatever I can to make you better, but I'm not going to sit here and yell at you and tell you got to do this because you're the one out there doing it. So
it comes down to too, right? I think that there's definitely something to be said for, and again, I think the good teams, good coaching staffs, good programs, whether you're talking about at the pro level or at the college level, have always had this, but it's a we, right? We're all working together. And as a coaching staff and players, there has to be a mutual trust back and forth, that the player has to know that if the coach is getting on me as a player, like the reason why that's happening is because the coach wants me to be better. They want me to see a certain thing, or they want me to be able to do something better, or whatever it might be, for my benefit and for the benefit of the team. And there has to be trust that's built up in order for that to happen. And then again, it also has to be the other way around, where a coach has to be able to trust the player, that when we're having those honest conversations and the player's saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing out there, the coach has to know that the player, again, has the best interest of the team, the program at heart. And so if you build that trust, then you get that peer-to-peer interaction like you're talking about, where it's not a coach up on high saying, hey, you're doing this wrong and you got to do this because Instead, it's, hey, we have to collectively figure this out, both for your individual benefit as a player, but also, again, more importantly, for the team concept. And I think that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Something I should have mentioned, like you said, is the trust of it. And it's like, certain people, like maybe, yeah, I just think as, even in the professionals, you got to earn that trust, like you mentioned, right? Like right away as a rookie, maybe I'm not saying the head coach is, I'm going to sit you down. What do you think? Like, obviously the coach is still the coach, but yeah, as you said, like those players who are able to garner the trust over years and years of doing it. Like, yeah, there's a time and place for, hey, like we got to listen to this. And like you said, those players who are able to earn that trust, it does become really, really beneficial to like open up some of those conversations and being like, hey, how are we going to guard this goal screen? Like it's tough to guard. And as a coach, we may not have the answer from watching film, but you guys are out there doing it. So some of those conversations were good to hear. And, really, I think can be taken to the college level. And like you said, coach is still the coach. There's still, you still need a head coach. I get all that, but it's just like like you said, earning trust and then looking at players who do earn the trust and do prove that they have a good, IQ and sense of what's going on out there.
Yeah, there's no doubt that there's obviously some players those conversations are going to be easier with and more productive, and some players that they're not. And as you said, again, hopefully the more time a player spends in your program, the more productive those conversations are going to be between a player and a member of the coaching staff. And then you're going to get to the ultimate result that you want, which is helping the player to improve and ultimately helping the team to get better. All right, Marty, before we wrap up, I want to ask you a 2-part final question here. So part 1, when you look ahead over this next year, what do you see as being your biggest challenge? And then secondly, when you think about what you get to do every day, what brings you the most joy? So your biggest challenge and then your biggest joy.
Sweet. Wrapping up with a tough one, Mike.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
I think the challenge question is, so this year going back to Akron, the coach has been able to give me some more responsibilities. Like I got my own scouts. I got my own, some players to work out with and watch film. So I think the challenge will be, can I have the same relationship as I did with the players last year in a little bit bigger role? So it's like last year, I think it's easy to be well-liked when you're just in the back. Like I was never explaining the film. I was never running in it. I was never running a drill in practice. But this year, when I've been given some more of those responsibilities, hey, Marty, you're going to explain this drill and you're going to run it in practice. Hey, Marty, you got, 5 scouts this year. Hey, Marty, you got a player you got to work out with 3 times a week and watch film with them. So I think it's building that relationship, building that trust, and then trying to keep the players bought into what I'm trying to say. And I think that'll be a challenge of, with a bigger role as being of more in an assistant type of position, can I still, get the same respect and same well-liked, I think, that I was able to accomplish last year as in a bigger role. And then the second part you said, joy.
Biggest joy.
Okay. I think the biggest joy is it's the player relationship. I think it's on the court. It's working with them. It's, the individual stuff that I love doing with players one-on-one, whether it's film or workout, and then just in practice, right? Like I'm still playing a lot of times on the practice team, which I love. And I think it can help, coach the practice team too, because we have a few of our walk-ons and freshmen are on that team with me. So it's a lot of times motivating them, keeping them confident, keeping them energized to sometimes it probably is tough as a freshman. Your first year, you're sitting on the scout team with me and, another GA. It's it's probably disappointing some days. I get that. But trying to continue to teach those players on the scout team with me, and then also just seeing things on the court. The biggest joy definitely just being on the court with the players.
That's good stuff. And I think you made a great point about trying to keep the players who are maybe not having the season go the way that they would have hoped if they could have drawn it up, but to be able to keep them in a positive spirit. There's tremendous, tremendous value in that without question. Before we get out, Marty, I want to give you a chance to share how people can connect with you, whether you want to share email, social media, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then after you do that, I will jump back in and wrap things up.
Sweet. I think that email will probably be the easiest. So it's just my full name, MartyVosters @gmail.com.
Does not get any easier than that. And we'll have all that in the show notes so people will be able to find it if you want to reach out to Marty. Cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule to join us tonight. Really appreciate it. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening. And we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional, membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more.
Thanks for listening to the Hoopheads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.